All right, town hall number 3. Yeah, so I'm Keith, the founder, I guess, of Republic, and um, I thought today we have an agenda, but I thought we could just go around, do quick intros, and anything people want to put on the docket for discussion could go ahead and just, I know most of us know each other, but just for recording's sake, letting everyone know. Yeah, Phil, do you want to start off and then pass it on to somebody when you're...
I'm Phil, and now everyone knows my slogan. I'm the in-house data dignity geek, friend of the, I guess, founder Keith Axline, and excited to be with all of you here today. And I'll pass the mic to our new friend, Crystal.
Hello, everyone. I'm Crystal. I'm with a core contributor at JournoDAO, former photojournalist, current academic studying yoga and Buddhism. And data privacy nerd from for many years. And I'll kick it over to Corey.
Thanks, Crystal. Corey, public interest attorney and family member of Keith. The family just pays me to keep track of him, make sure he doesn't get in too much trouble. I'll kick it over to Christina.
I knew it. Yeah, this is Alaric under...
Oh, hey, Alaric here. Just been doing iOS for probably 15 years and developing for 20-something years. Just thought I'd join and help out because I like the mission, which is to get rich at all costs, right? Something like that.
Yep, nailed it. Or die trying. Okay, cool. Well, I think for now we wanted to focus on, I can give a few updates. I'm actually going to push out the weekly update probably a little bit after this call. Not too much on the app side. Still working on getting the iOS app out, but I had a couple of interesting calls this week with a person from Ocean Protocol, which may be like the next thing that we kind of integrate with besides Streamer, as far as like actual sharing and monetization options for the data that the app collects. And they have like a grant. They have 2 like grant tracks. Basically, one is like a DAO approved grant where you submit a proposal and then the DAO votes on whether to grant you funds, and it's like the first time that's you get it, it's like capped at $3,000, but then if you continue to like advance your proposal, then the amount goes up. And then they also have like a Shipyard Program, which is like the core team basically does a deep evaluation of you and your project and decides that they want to like sustainably pay you to develop it. It's like something that directly benefits like the ocean ecosystem. So just throwing that out there, I'm kind of looking at both options. The core team member I was talking to suggested like doing the first one just to get to know the technology and use that money to like evaluate the integration, and then move on to like the kind of sustainable one if it seems like the Ocean Protocol is like a long-term like partner for Republic. But they're pretty big in the space, and I knew about them since before I even started Republic. So I think the Data Union app uses them pretty heavily. Yeah, any questions about that? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering, Keith, because I mean, I'm familiar also with Ocean, but not familiar with them at the same time. Could you just tell us more about like what they're doing, how this could like benefit Republic?
Yeah, so Streamer is like decentralized network. It's like a pub sub, like you just publish your data out there and then people can subscribe to it. And they handle the encryption. And then, but Ocean is more like a ecosystem for like doing the computing on your data, like a query and on your data in like a secure environment. And then also allowing you to like financialize that transaction by like staking their coin and like securing your transaction that way. And so that's why I haven't really dived in yet, is because it's a little bit more complex, but there's a lot of like people using it who I trust. And, you know, I've only heard like generally positive things about it. And I think that that's definitely, so I guess step one is like evaluating the model. Like, is it like a good model for Republic? And then, but also even if like I don't personally like it, would that be something that users want to like be able to have the option to use or something? Does that make sense? I think there's a lot of like the landscape right now, and I don't really have a preference for which way Republic goes. I think it could go all ways and just like kind of do the allow people to use whatever they want. But there's like secure multi-party computation, which is like an environment where you put in your data and then along with a lot of other people, and then like queries can be made of it in this environment in a secure way that doesn't divulge any of your like identifying information. And as part of that, or I don't know if it's independent of that, there's like this concept of differential privacy, where you kind of like fuzz the data so that it gives you the result, but without actually having the data in it. So like, for example, the algorithm could know like what your like heart rate and other biometrics are, but then the actual metrics that it gives the querier are not that, they're different, but they show like the same things as that. And there's kind of like a toggle on it where you can like make it like fuzzier or not. And so there's all these ways that people are like, you know, coming at this problem. And I think on our what would you call the call, Phil, that we're on, the pets and like privacy enhancing technology and governance is the working group by Radical Exchange that we're on.
How they call it, the working group? It's like the data governance research unit. But it's nice because there's different ideas. There's that whole like pets, so like privacy enhancing technologies, that's interesting. And then there's the whole like data union aspect. They're like not going exactly the same direction. Like Keith, you're more familiar, you probably get what I mean. Like when like the pets aspect there aren't much talks about like putting value on the data there. It's more about like just having like respecting people's privacy and not being able to track necessarily where that data comes from. But there aren't many mentions like in the papers about like providing value to the individuals for the data they create. Whereas like that's more of the ideas behind data unions.
Yeah.
Kind of what I see. I don't know, like it's interesting.
Yeah, it's my take on it is it's a group of like academics who are kind of like close to the research papers and the algorithms that you know, could be the basis for a lot of like applied technology. And so it's interesting to like hear them debate out like the nuts and bolts of it, but it's probably pretty low level for most people. But there was a guest speaker on there, Phil. I sent you his name, but I forget.
Raul, and I can't remember his last name.
Fernandez.
Raul Castro Fernandez.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and he's working on this concept of like a data station, he calls it, and has written a paper about it. And I'm going to put that in the newsletter update, but that's, as far as I understand it, kind of like a data escrow. And it's kind of like what I'm talking about, like even with like secure multi-party computation or the ocean protocol or these data stations, it's kind of like creating this environment where like the magic happens, like according to like different parameters, that kind of like keep the safe transition of data and knowledge like separate. So he described it as like a data escrow, where like you put in the query and then you put in the data, and then nothing leaves that environment without like the data owner's approval. It's kind of like an escrow account where like both people have to sign off on it or something.
I like the fuzzy data stuff too. Sounds cool. Kind of looking into it now.
Yeah, and the way I know about that is through our health data partner Agora, who our relationship's been kind of like silent recently. I think they're super busy, and so I just like getting that iOS app out, but they're going to basically use the code of the iOS app to customize their own that's purely focused on health kit data. And they have they have the researchers in like the biomedical space that are kind of like looking for this data and are ready to buy it. And so they've been kind of developing that secure environment where that can happen. And so they want to take the Republic mobile app and put their branding on it, take out all the stuff that has to do with like location and sensors and stuff that's not health kit data, and then get it onto their like secure query platform or whatever. And so they're the ones who have like the differential privacy algorithm that is going to be like integrated into the app. So it's not something I'm like super familiar with, but it's pretty interesting as far as, it's a good firewall between your data, like getting people the insights without actually like divulging your biometric signature.
Yeah, sounds promising. Does Apple, do they designate anything in particular about having that data? Like, do they have any requirements or anything? Like, I know probably 7 or 8 years ago, they were pretty strict about it. Do they just require you to have a privacy policy on it or something, or is there any restrictions on it? Like, have you any trouble getting through review or anything like that?
No, there is a delineation between wellness data and actual like medical data. And I guess like heart rate and steps, for example, are just considered wellness. And so that like falls under a different jurisdiction. But then, but as Apple like adds more actual medical records that you can share like with your doctor and that put into their health app and stuff, then that requires like a different level of permission that on the app. And I haven't like ticked that box yet. I guess like
Okay,
the entitlement.
cool. Just checking. Just curious about that.
No, that's good. That's why I want you here. Like, I don't know all these things. So, but yeah, that's kind of the value that this Agora partner brings to it, is like they have all the compliance and knowledge about like how medical data can be used and stuff. So I don't have to be an expert. And then we can just use their implementation to kind of get certified for that stuff in the Republic app as well.
Yeah, it sounds like a safe bet.
Yeah, if we just use their implementation of that. There is some sense where like since I'm building the app, is like not ever being able to see the data that it collects and just completely putting it up to the user as far as like opting in. I think that protects us a little bit, but I do need to research a little bit more about that. So those were kind of like the weekly updates that I was going to put into the newsletter. Any other questions about that? And Crystal, since you're kind of new to this, is there any like context I can give? I kind of just jumped in talking about stuff, but anything that would kind of answer any questions for you?
No, that's good. I'm just kind of in listening mode.
Okay.
Kind of putting it all together in my brain.
All right.
You want to jump keep the action points? It's
Yeah.
it's sad that Emre isn't there because he's the one who went to touch those action points. But yeah, we could dive into that.
Yeah. So my interpretation of that, I think the two of you were talking about it more, but my interpretation was that I'm going to come up with like things that the DAO needs to do and then assign those things out to people, or at least have people be able to volunteer for those.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's what him and I both had in mind, kind of figuring out what we want to do next and who's going to do what.
Yeah. And so my kind of DAO ethos, some of you have read the doc, is that I just want to find the people that, or what people enjoy doing and can do for the long run, so I'm not looking for anybody to volunteer for stuff that like sounds like drudgery or anything, but I think there's whatever you enjoy doing, there's a way to direct that effort towards something that Republic would derive value from. So like in my mind, aside from like the software development, there's just a lot of like partnership outreach that I think needs to be done. I don't really want to like market Republic and do ads or whatever, but I think just going like not hand to hand, but like manually just going into communities that would like are working on like similar things or mission aligned, and just like figuring out ways that we could like bring value to them seems like the biggest way to, I think as a group that's building open source software that we can just like give away and like help people use, I think we can just, instead of trying to convince people to to like do something for us for free, we can just go and figure out the problems that we can solve for other people that like we're going to need to solve anyway. So that's kind of like and that's stuff that I don't really have time to do, or doesn't seem like the best use of my time. But like, I think I was talking to Corey about, approaching different environmental groups, since he's familiar with that space anyway, and kind of, finding people that are already thinking about how data is going to be needed to like verify, environmental attributes of property, of weather, of everything, and how getting people paid for contributing that data can actually scale it up a lot faster than trying to just pay people to go out and establish this stuff. You could just incentivize people in like a more decentralized way. And I would guess that there's not a lot of environmental groups thinking along those lines, and we could kind of be the ambassadors of that. Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
I was just curious, Keith, to know. So there's partnerships. That's something we should leverage and like try to grow. Because I agree with you. I think if we just do our own thing and then expect people to download our app, I don't know how successful we'll be at that. I don't know if that's what we want. I think the partnership track is something I like too. So, like, what else should we, like prioritize, because you like doing the software, like what would you like people, like if you could have like people happy doing whatever they want to do in volunteering, like what would you like to see?
I think, I mean, looking for grant funding is a huge one. And I was hoping, I mean, Emery kind of alluded to being interested in doing that. And he just did one for Data Union DAO. And since we're not doing VC funding, you know, I think just having, I mean, I can help, and I have like a lot of text that I've already written for like various proposals and stuff. It would just be like getting some sort of boilerplate like proposal down so that we don't have to go to each grant and like start over and start over and start over, and like, but anyone could kind of come in and like tailor our pitch to whatever grant we were going after. And wouldn't have to do that alone, and that's something that I'm probably going to do on my own, like whether anyone jumps on or not. But yeah, so for example, like the ocean grant would probably be the first thing, like that's on my to-do list, but I'm not sure that I'm like the only one who can do that. And then there's lots of other grant opportunities, like especially like in the, if anyone's interested in like the UBI space, I mean, I think there's like that data dividend group that Andrew Yang started or is affiliated with, that's kind of along these lines of what we're talking about is a future where people basically get a UBI, not from the government, but from just being able to efficiently monetize the value of their data. And I've seen a few like grant proposals along that, and they're like at the research stage in different like UBI, I don't know what you call them, donors or funds or whatever. There's like a lot of money out there for people who want to innovate in the UBI space, which I think we could be like a novel project for that. And then that post that I wrote on Monday, like about being more in the refi and DeSci space, it's kind of like partnerships and grants go hand in hand in my mind, but they are kind of different depending on who you're talking to. I don't know, like as different levels of outsiders on the call, like when you first approach Republic, I mean, what do you think it needs? I think a rebranding and redesign is probably necessary for us to be taken seriously at some point, but I'd like to hear more from people and do less talking.
And I don't see any issues with the design. I'm pretty much a stickler for that stuff, but
Yeah,
I've
Okay.
never had issues with it. But it's, you know, it's always good to rethink it once you get your goals solidified and grow. But I don't know, I guess I wouldn't focus on that personally, because I think it'll come to you eventually. You know?
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's solid. I
Okay.
think, yeah, I wouldn't rebrand until you like get more community and more stuff in motion. And like we rebranded Unlock last year, and that was a hot ass mess. I wouldn't touch that.
Oh, yeah.
And what we had before was like, this is way better than what we had before, what Unlock had. So I would just run with it.
Okay, well, that's good to hear, because that was like, in my mind, that was like a 30 to 50K debt that I was in that I needed to like find funding for. So
Whatever makes you happy, you know. But I think still growing and feeling things out. And I think once you hit that nerve and you figure out what the motto is or whatever that is that really gets people, then you can focus your branding around that more,
Mhm.
nail it in, versus trying to, you know, just make something look good and be appealing at first, you know. But anyway, it'll take the time, I think.
I do think that design refresh, like a refresh at some point would be nice. but out of everything we could do at the moment, I don't think it's the priority. Like, I don't think that's what's stopping us from growing. I think we could allocate time into stuff, and especially capital. Like, think, because now, like, getting designers is just so expensive. I think we could make a better use of that money.
Yeah, I mean, look
Yeah.
at the MCon website. I feel embarrassed when I send that to people. And I know that was by design, but still, I mean, you know, that exists.
Yeah, the so ugly it's cool sort of thing. Yeah. All right, well that's good news, I think, from my perspective. But then yeah, I don't know. I think we're in this phase where I need people out there either spinning the narrative of what Republic will be and like what the vision is, because right now, like I don't really feel like the app right now is very indicative of what it could and should be, you know? And so I think we're not at that stage of like, oh, just go download the app and you'll get it or whatever. Because if people do that, then they'll be like, oh, okay. So it's another like, you know, passive income type data monetization app, when for me, really, it's just about like the ecosystem of tools that people are going to need in order to like, you know, properly license their data, like actually give high quality like consent based on like education about like just what your data is and your relationship to it. I think that needs to be there before you can really have the consent that these companies are like. We're in this transition, right, where like everyone's realizing that they're going to get class action lawsuits or just public blowback if and when like their data practices leak. But it's all like integral to their whole business model at this point. And so like everyone wants like the data on the customer to sell them to them, but they want to get out of like the collection and storage business. And there is no data licensing business really. Like the usage of this data is really not explicitly like outlined anywhere. And even if it is, it doesn't really reflect how it's actually being used. And so they're trying to find new sources of, it's basically like organic data, or like, you know, truly consented to like sharing of data, so that they can continue to run their business, and then they don't get the PR blowback, and they don't get, you know, like the increasing like legal liability as regulations come down. And so I think there's going to be a lot of people who jump in early with like stuff that's like slightly better than what we have now as far as like consent and rewarding people for the value and all this stuff, because it's like easier to do. It's easier to put a band-aid on it and just get to market quickly. But I think where I'd like Republic to be is like getting to the ideal that may not be, you know, really, there might not be a market for that premium now, but like maybe in a couple of years, it's going to, you know, companies are going to want to pay for the better sourced data so that it doesn't go away when people find out what they're doing with it, and so that it doesn't expose them to like future regulation, like as sentiment changes in the market. And so what's that?
Just saying, that's a good point. Get your free range organic data.
Yeah. And so if that's the playbook, the stuff that we need to do now to give people an accurate view of that is kind of like consolidate that narrative and get it out, because the product isn't going to be at that point for a while. So like along the way, unless we're just going to kind of sit here and wait for the products to be slowly, you know, achieve that vision so that we don't have to communicate about it, we can just like send it to people and it'll explain itself. That's kind of like the biggest biggest gap. It's like I can build the thing, but then I need people out there helping with this, like the bigger vision of it and why it's important and why they should hop on earlier rather than later. It's like, if you want this to exist sooner, then come help us build it, because it's going to take a long time if you don't, that sort of thing. And so I don't know how to like itemize that need into like things that you all want to do, but I'm hoping that like ideally I can, articulate the whole, and then everyone can just choose their own way to contribute to that. But I know that's kind of hard because, I've been thinking about this for years and you all are relatively new to it, so might not be generating any ideas. But then like the more I articulate what needs to be done and kind of like handing out tasks, the less like fun and interesting that's going to be for you, likely. So it's kind of like, if you have no ideas but you want to do something, I can definitely like just hand you stuff that needs to be done. But I'd prefer if everyone was just like, take it and run with it and make it less my thing and make it more your all's thing.
Keith, I wonder if we should be doing more education, because we have the vision that's going to happen, or there's going to be a need for our product in X amount of time from that. But wouldn't we be accelerating the day where the need for a product is going to happen if we do more education? I'd like to have people's feedback also on that, because that's something that's come up a few times in the previous calls too, is like we care about what we're doing, but most people either are aware and there aren't like sufficient incentives for them to care as much, or like people just don't care.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I agree, but I've been talking for a while. Anyone else want to weigh in?
I definitely agree. Where I falter is figuring out how to deliver that education. We don't have a big enough platform on our own right now to do the outreach and the education that we need to. So I mean, in some ways, I think it's another partnership question. There's partnerships for actually doing stuff with the data, but then there's other partnerships that can be about just educating around the need for this. It's also, of course, a funding issue. If there was funding, there could be more platforms and people to get on them. But I think the nuts and bolts of that, of an education campaign needs its own sort of dedicated time and workshopping and development.
Yeah, so is that kind of work interesting to anybody? Does anyone see any traction there?
I do care about the education aspect. I think that's something I enjoy doing. And but yeah, Corey brings a valid point, because like, let's say we start writing blog posts about like the problem and how to solve it. It would be nice if people read it. I think that's like, yeah, you need to educate someone. I do find it's a valid point. We need like partnership. I hadn't thought about it, partnerships for the education also.
And I do have like weekly like blog posts that you could, kind of like articulating what I think is most like urgent or palatable to people who generally don't care about this stuff, and explaining these concepts, and like slowly we'll kind of build some SEO and like viewers around that. But it's going to be, a slog and that's just something that like I can do. I don't know if anyone likes writing blog posts. We could do that on as something to contribute, but I don't know, that's kind of the extent of it. And then also eventually putting in like little, maybe like learn to earn modules into the app that kind of take you through different aspects of the data story and the economy and everything.
Keith, I'm up for the challenge.
Okay.
I have to practice writing more in English. So I think I think it'll be a good thing to force myself. Plus it's content I'd enjoy writing. Crystal, you can go. I saw you were gonna.
Say I can help edit. I'm kind of at my capacity for things I can do now, especially with school about to start. I like to brainstorm. That one, I as long as I don't have homework, like I feel like I have this long list of homework of things that need to be done. One thing that came to mind is tapping into the existing privacy data communities. There's a lot of really active ones on Twitter that I follow. And then like the Hope Conference is going on right now. I think that's founded by 2600. And then Black Hat and DEF CON are gearing up, I think now. Starting to see some tweets about that. So I know it's probably not possible to do right now, but if you can tap into that market or that community that already understands the value of privacy and then have them begin to push it out and educate those who don't understand or don't think it matters. It kind of feels like in this case, you kind of have to go to the people that already know it and then have them help push it out.
Well, maybe you could be like well, first of all, I think it's awesome if everyone here would just show up to this call every week, and I don't expect anything more more than that, like this is super helpful for me, and it just kind of like keeps momentum going. So I do consider that like a huge help. I don't expect anything beyond this but we're just kind of brainstorming like what we could ask people to do as well. But also like to what you said, Crystal, I've noticed I've gotten a lot of like almost hostility from like the privacy groups, which is kind of where I started my own journey, just trying to be digitally private. And then that led me to realize that I couldn't fully get there. And also it was like its own part-time job to like not only keep tabs on my stuff, but also like my wife really likes using Google Docs, and I have to like convince her to like uproot her whole like work life and like become her own like advocate within like her company and all this stuff. And then I just realized like how insurmountable that was. So it's like you can do so then that moved me into like data ownership and like actually prosecuting people who like abuse your data and then like actually capturing that value for yourself. And so that's how we ended up here. But along the way, I thought that my privacy people would follow me and like be happy about it, and come to the same conclusions. But instead they start getting upset about the idea of selling data in the first place. And it seems like philosophically they just want to like build the walls higher and not acknowledge reality in a lot of ways. So if you want to be the ambassador to that community, since that's kind of like you're still talking to them and stuff, I don't really know how to message to, like I joined like the Mozilla kind of mailing list of privacy, like data privacy people, and I'm still on it, but I would like try and share my stuff when I started talking about like a marketplace and all this stuff, and I would just get pages and pages of like how stupid I was and how small-minded I was stuff. And it was like, I'm like, all right. And it really just came down to like a differing intuition about what the future was like and what would happen if you did this and what would happen if you did this. And it's like, well, you seem certain that you know the future, but I think it's going to be different. So I'm going to go over here and do it. So
interesting. I'll pass it along to my hacker dudes and see what they say, because they're very brutal with their feedback. So I'll see what their pain points are there, and then come back at you. But also too, if you frame it in that UBI perspective, I mean, it might just be messaging and framing. I mean, I think when it's framed in UBI, that's also a great entry point for that whole community, because that's what a lot of them are into. I know that's what I'm into. So I think when you frame it from that perspective, maybe that can help balance. And then some people just like to get pissed and get angry and
Yeah,
poo-poo all over everything. So there's that.
maybe I'll go back and dig up that email where this person just thought that they were like obviously like wiping the floor with me, like rhetorically, and how like just it was so patronizing and stuff. And it was like, okay, like, I'm sorry. We'll see who ends up being right.
Okay, I'll send it to both of my guys, and I think I'm grabbing coffee with them before I head to Colorado. So it'll be, I'll shield you if it goes awry.
All right. I mean, I'm happy to have those conversations, but like if I found it wasn't good faith, like we're kind of like brainstorming about what the future could be like,
Mhm.
and they've already decided exactly how it's going to be. And if it goes in my direction, that's bad, so why would they help me? And like they just want to shut me down. So
Yeah,
privacy is definitely like something I care about, and I'm sad that it's not actually possible. Like I wish we could develop a software tool that like enshrined privacy as we had it on the internet when the internet started, and like mimics the real world privacy that we have. I mean, to lesser degrees, but like, before the internet, the kind of privacy that you had as a person, just leaving your house and going where you wanted and then coming back, and nobody knew where you were, unless you told them. Like, that's just unheard of. And I just don't think software just doesn't work that way. Like it has to be a social political agreement, which means like enforcing the misuse of this data. If you are just focused on preventing the data from escaping your purview, then like it's done. You've already lost. It can all be reverse engineered based on the data that we have.
So what are they accusing you of? Are they accusing you of being like fatalistic or apathetic about the fact that big, centralized control is going to take over, and it's how we maneuver within that, like hopping on lily pads of an inevitable river? Is that basically what your stance is versus them saying, no, you have to fight back 100%, always push back against centralization, no matter what. We have to be the opposing force rather than the Aikido flex with the wind force.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like we need to lobby our representatives in Congress. We need to like do all this stuff, which I'm definitely for. But I think the jump that I made that they didn't was like how stalled politics was going to be on this. And then even when it gets through, it'll be based on like technology as it was like 5 years prior or whatever. And the most powerful force is just like consumer sentiment, right? Like if it's in everyone's economic interest, which I believe that it is, to build the walls and enforce the abuse. Like that's how I jumped to framing this as like data theft. And like to do that, you have to like materialize a market value for the data. And so like that's why we need to have a marketplace and an open market for data, so that we know how much it is, and then we can see that it's these people are profiting off of it. And if we assume that we should be the ones profiting off of it because it's generated like from our behavior, then that is just like a theft that everyone can understand. Is like, oh yeah, Google's rich because of all this data that was generated by people, and they captured it and didn't share any of that value with them. So I think that's an argument that anyone can understand, but we can't get there until there's an open marketplace. And I think they were of the mind of, I just don't want anyone to know anything about me. And that's like, I'm just going to kind of petulantly put my foot down and say, no, it's wrong that people can know things about me. I don't want people to know things about me. And it's like, yep, I agree with you. I don't. but like I'm trying to deal with, you know, the state of play here and try and get us to a better situation eventually.
Well, I mean, I guess hyperbole, you know, the dramatics get a lot of publicity and it gets a lot of emotion riled up. You know, early cypherpunks went through that as well, with like Timothy May raising his fist and being, you know, completely anti, you know, all establishment. And then there was a few others, I don't know the history right off the top of my head, but that were kind of more willing to work within the system. So, you know, it's a kind of a push and pull, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the most, like you said, what did you call it? The Aikido move? Like that's like
Yeah, using, you know, your opponent's attacks against themselves.
yeah, and that's where like the most rewarding thing is for me. Like there's all this like energy pushing against our interests, and yeah, Republic is my play to kind of like turn that around and, you know, use the markets, use the same way that like the market is used against us to like actually get the transformation that we want. Because I think, you know, the system has developed these like exhaust valves of, you know, street protests and voting and all this stuff that like the system is pretty happy to let us feel like we're doing something with these things, and then we just kind of give up or whatever, and just the chips fall where we may. Like I did my part, and so I really want to, you know, just put a button on a phone that somebody can press and their will is like actually listened to by the system. And the mediating factor for that is data, at least at the moment. So
I feel like it's a yes and conversation. Like I'm still gonna lock down as much as I possibly can, the parts that are important. But then there's some things that I'm like, okay, this I'll just let out into the world. So if you give somebody like the ability to see exactly what they give out into the world is worth, and still also protect what they want to protect, I kind of feel like both can coexist depending on the frame, how it's framed.
yeah, and that's why last time I didn't, you know, monetizing data isn't really like what's exciting to me. That's kind of like eating my vegetables in a way, because that's where the traction is. But like, yeah, the real payoff for me is just, you know, more autonomy in my life, less anxiety about who knows what about me, just, you know, not having to think about this stuff at all because I know it's taken care of. Like I want to think about this for 10 years so I don't have to ever think about it again, and nobody does, you know.
Yeah, Keith, I dropped in the chat. That's an idea I've been thinking about a lot lately. Is so like we label ourselves and many other like entities label themselves as data unions. Now it's just trying to think more about that, and I find there's like many parallels with like the original need for labor unions, because like basically workers were being there was like exploitation of those workers by factory owners, and I feel like when you start like perceiving your data as labor, then the parallel seems like pretty obvious. Like we're volunteering, basically we're giving out our data for free, those companies are generating profits out of it. Like there's a need for us to unionize because we're being exploited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I liked that framing. You can go back on my blog posts, and I kind of like tried to, you know, use that meme, and didn't really take off, and people started like focusing on that in like unhelpful ways and not listening to what I was saying or something. And then it becomes like the discrepancy between how data isn't actually like labor and all this stuff, when it's like they're missing the whole point of what I was trying to say. So like I've leaned off of that. But if like you're talking to an audience that like that's what gets it through, I think that's a good one. It's like we all kind of need a few little like shorthand memes to pull out depending on the audience, like what's gonna help it resonate.
Yeah, you could come in with a quiver of memes. You know, you could do a whole thought exercise, like spend, one dedicated channel thread in the Discord or something of just let's have a metaphor contest, which will inspire writing, conceptual writing, and then from there you could have certain people who are good at writing about metaphors and conceptual stuff write about that, then other people who are good at writing about the actual app write about the mechanics of the app. And because I'm not really good at writing about mechanics, but I'm definitely a stream of consciousness type of guy, and God forbid the person coming behind me trying to edit the stuff that I do. So, it can take kind of a team of things and just little baby steps at a time. So maybe have just like some kind of open space for saying, here's where all the metaphors, we're going to put those here for what this does or what the problem is, and see how many metaphors we can come up with. Good and bad and ugly.
All right, I'm anointing you metaphor czar. Yeah, and like an extension of that could be like arguments that we hear. Oh, go ahead, Corey.
No, I love that idea. I, as with most Fridays, have a hard stop at the top of the hour. So I just wanted to say before I do jump, in terms of interests, I can't take the lead on writing a grant, but I would like to help in whatever way I can with that. Kind of like Crystal said, I can help with editing or doing some research in small bites. The other thing that interests me, I think I raised this a while ago to you, Keith, is looking at education institutions. Like, so the Stanford Door School of Sustainability is opening up this fall, and it looks big and ambitious, and there's a lot going on there. I have no idea how to even get in there, but I do know some scientists who have gone to Stanford, so I would love to start talking to them and see if I can get a better understanding of how our application might fit in academic research worlds, and if so, if there's any grant money there or ways for us to partner. That interests me, so I'd like to kind of take that on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that sounds really promising. I like having an excuse to reach out and talk to smart people. So, yeah, but aside from that, if you all just want to keep showing up to this, I think that's step one. Oh, and as far as like what we ask of other people, I would just say if we coalesce around pushing people to the blog and website to like just sign up with their email, I think that's like the easiest ask of people. Like at the very minimum, if you're interested at all in what we're doing, like just go and sign up, and then you can like pay attention to the weekly updates or not, or like the educational blog posts that we put out or not, or you can ignore it for 6 months and then like suddenly you have some time and you can pay attention again. That'll just be like the stream that kind of unifies everybody. So I think a lot of people do like just follow us on Twitter or whatever, and like I might have to put my head down and build for a while and not do our Twitter account, and it seems like nothing's happening, but I think I can commit to always doing the weekly update, so do that.
Thanks everyone, nice to see you all. See you next week.
All right, bye Corey. And yeah, unless there's anything else from y'all, I'm gonna there's a DAO or a Sapien roundtable that I'm supposed to go to at 11 and represent Republic, if a Twitter space, if you all want to head over there or whatever, that's where I'll be.
11 your time, so I guess that's in 1 minute.
Yeah.
I gotta go to a Crypto Sapiens meeting, but good luck. Yeah, sorry I had to jump in a little late, wrangling kids at the neighborhood swimming pool. So yeah.
No, glad you did.
My wife's a hairstylist, and right now, with me being jobless, and we're living on a hairstylist salary, so I'm wrangling the kids.
Well, that's super valuable. Like I was taking care of the kids for a lot of the pandemic, and I factored in like what we would have to pay for childcare as like my salary.
Yes. Yeah. It's
like,
expensive. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right, y'all. Well, take care.
All right.
Cool.
Bye.
See you
Bye,
next week.
everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye. See ya.